Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion webinar. Joining us are board of directors who are on this webinar as well. And we want to thank the Chamber Board of Directors for all they do and the staff for making today possible. On this call, as panelists, is our 2021 Chairman, Paul Murphy, Chairman and CEO, Cadence Bank. Joining us today, he'll be leading our conversation. Also, two other board members, including Mark Montgomery of the Chamber's Foundation. He, of course, is over at Amity, and new to the board as of last year at the Chamber Board of Commerce, we have with us Scott Silvers. Thank you again, and he is with Fifth Third. Thank you to our board members on the panel, and also for those who are joining in on the call, including our board of directors and our other two panelists who are joining us today, who will provide some additional insights, include Andrea Alexander of McKinsey. She's going to give us some data points, important and relevant information, and is applied to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Cadence Bank has allowed us to bring with us to the panel their Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. So thank you so much, Myra Caldwell, for joining us. Thanks a lot. So let's begin with the purpose of today's call. As many of you bank CEOs who are on this line understand the value and importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Your Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is proud to say that we have been practicing what we preach. I have been at the helm now 14 years, and it was very important that our chamber began that conversation years ago. Fortunately, we had a board of directors who understood the importance of diversity. At any given point, your Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors has been 40% non-Hispanic. Paul Murphy is the second non-Hispanic to lead as our chairman. It is a very, very important and viable and valuable opportunity for the chamber to lead in this front. And we do so by doing it ourselves. Our Young Emerging Leaders program through our foundation has admitted over 300 graduates, Hispanic and non-Hispanic. Our Business Institute also has individuals from a variety of backgrounds. When you look at the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, whether you Google us or you take a look at our videos, you'll see the diversity of the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. The reach of the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is over 3 million on CBS, KHOU, Entercom, and Univision Radio and Television. We're here today to provide you with the opportunity to allow us the opportunity to get to know your bank, what we can do to partner with you, and how we can customize whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So on that note, I'd like us to welcome and hand it over to someone who's been with me at the chamber since day one. When I first came, we found out that we no longer had a headquarter office. And it was Paul Murphy at the time who opened their doors to us, where we are still located downtown in the Amity Bank building. And we've been able to grow and blossom because of sponsors and friends like you. And so interesting that years later, Paul was asked to serve on the chamber board and now is our chairman. And we are here today because of board members like Paul, like Scott, like Mark, and so many others on this call. So please welcome our chairman, Paul Murphy.
Thanks, Laura, and thank all of you for joining us today. Just a couple of things. When I first met Laura 14 years ago, I was immediately impressed. The more I've gotten to know her and seen the growth at the chamber, then you can really see what leadership is all about. Some might describe her as a force of nature. She is game on, she's motivated, she's smart, and she's really good at connecting people and growing the chamber. And so the reason we want to have the call today is to invite all of you to begin developing a relationship with the chamber. Once COVID gets a little bit further behind us, there'll be a number of events that'll be available and different ways that you can connect. The Emerging Leaders program that Laura mentioned is super impressive. The young men and women that are going through that program are prospective board members for banks throughout the region. They're prospective clients, they're prospective bankers. And so, fortunately, the chamber is big enough that there's a lot to go around. We can share, and we would like to see, other banks in the region have a strong relationship with the chamber. One of the ideas is the DEI initiatives that, for many of us have become more and more intense. This is clearly a place where you can expand your thinking and see some of the programs that the chamber has, which would fit those initiatives nicely. And then last, there's just good opportunities to get to know the business community. Laura's going to tell you a little bit more about some of the metrics and the growth over the years, but it is a thriving, healthy, well-managed chamber, and there are a lot of good prospects and good potential in developing a relationship, and we hope all of you will consider doing so. With that, I'll turn it back to Laura.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. And just some demographics, as you all know, Hispanics represent over 42% of the market here in Houston. We also have a consumer spending per year of over $50 billion just in Houston. We are also first among first home buyers in Houston. Hispanic women are the #1 growing entrepreneur in the country. We also have a national reach, state reach, and across the county. We're not specific to a geographic area. We advocate for business every day. We know who the small business owners are. We understand your needs, and the more we know about what you're trying to do, the better it is that we'll be able to support your interests. We work with everything from corporations to individuals. We can help you with opportunities if you're trying to hire, and if you're trying to, once again, penetrate this Hispanic market. We're all about numbers and data and research. If you visit our website, you can find a section with resources, data that we have compiled with partners at Stanford University, at a variety of different foundations with the Hobby Center, School of Public Policy, and others. On that note, let's talk about some of the data. Our newest partner, folks from McKinsey. Andrea, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So just to introduce myself, I'm Andrea Alexander, a leader in McKinsey's organization practice, and I spend all of my time thinking about people. So that's individuals, organizations, and teams, and how to help them accomplish what no one thought was possible. Culture is a big part of that, and making sure that there's an inclusive culture so that people feel comfortable bringing their full selves to work. I've been with McKinsey for over a decade, and for the past 6 years, I've been focused on part of my time on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just want to share some grounding thoughts or facts for us that will help influence the conversation going forward. I'm going to share my screen now and walk you through some materials that will be helpful. So first, just to ground us as a reminder, there's real benefits to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's worth commenting on the fact that diversity is all about representation, and a lot of organizations focus there. But at the end of the day, you also need to make sure that you have an inclusive environment so that people actually want to remain in your organization, and also have really thought about how to create an equitable environment where there's an equal access to opportunity. There's, as you can see on this page, different reasons why diversity, equity, and inclusion are important. The one that I'll highlight here is really around increased customer insight and innovation. When we have more diverse teams, we are able to really be more thoughtful about the products that we decide to offer and how we reach our customers. There's also a real increased focus on global image and kind of having this license to operate, and an expectation that within an organization, you've created a more inclusive, equitable environment. There's also real data that shows that diverse organizations are more likely to outperform their peers. So there's a financial benefit to diversity, especially in the top team, because that's what we've been able to quantify. Here, what you'll see is that more ethnically diverse organizations we found are 33% more likely to outperform their peers. And the benefit associated with gender diversity is 24%. I think it's really interesting here that there's more of an uptick that you get when it comes to ethnic diversity. And my hypothesis is that part of that's because historically, a lot of organizations have focused on gender diversity and started to move the needle. But those that have really gotten ethnic diversity right are seeing an even bigger impact because it's something that others haven't focused on yet. Now, let's talk more specifically about the financial industry and Hispanics in particular. So there's some good news to share that's good to orient ourselves on. So first, Fortune 1000 companies, we've seen a 3% increase in the number that have at least one Latino director on their board over the last year. So that's good news, right? We're making progress in the right direction. We also have almost 70% of senior leaders say that ethnic diversity is a high personal priority. So people are seeing the value and saying that this is something they want to focus on going forward. We've also seen a real increase, almost 35%, in Hispanic and Latino business owners from 2009 to 2019. And then finally, 61% of Hispanic and Latino individuals, compared to 41% of people and 52% of Black people, are really increasing their share of the talent pool. So we're seeing an increased share of Hispanics and Latinos when it comes to the talent pool, which is also great. Now, the story is not all rosy, though. So first, only 2% of C-suite executives in financial services are Hispanic and Latino. And the 2% number is small in itself, but I like to think about our fair share. And given the fact that 18% of the US population is Hispanic or Latino, you would expect it to be, or want it to be, on par to that. So we still have a gap to really close there. There's also a real economic or wealth gap that we see compared to white Americans. And so finding ways to close that economic gap or that wealth gap will be very important. We also find that almost 80% of Latinos say that they are not able to bring their full selves to work, right? They're repressing part of who they are when they're in the job. What that means is you're not getting the best of all of your people, right? And you're not getting the best, you're not having your teams make the best decisions because people are second guessing whether they should say what's really on their mind. And 63% of Hispanics and Latinos do not feel welcomed or included at work, right? And so this is something that we really have an opportunity to help shape and change going forward, but it's going to take real deliberate action, and not only from the leaders in the organization, but make sure that this is also a priority from the top all the way down to the front line. So I will stop there.
So Andrea, thank you for that information. We're going to continue with the dialogue, but from your perspective, specifically as you looked at the data, what are two things that the banks on these calls could do that might have a very immediate impact?
Yeah, so two things. So one, I would say really focus on data, right? A lot of times organizations create priorities around diversity, equity, and inclusion based off of, I think this would be good. I think this would have a lot of impact. But when you look at the data, you may find, oh, we should focus somewhere else. Specific example, a lot of organizations focus on recruiting. Let's get more people into the organization that are Hispanic or Latino. But actually, if you look at the data, you actually might see that, entry level, we actually do have a lot of Hispanics and Latinos and diverse talent, but promotions is actually where we need to focus more. And so when you look at the data, you'll be able to see where will we be able to move the needle the most with our initiatives. And often it is the promotions and promotions from entry level to that first manager position. That if you can get more diverse talent through that, what we refer to as broken rung, then that will fix a lot of your problem and you'll continue to see them progress throughout the funnel. That would be one. Two would be, this needs to be more than just this is the initiative we're going to implement, go do it, and a real change around mindsets and behaviors. You have to understand that a lot of what people are doing now that may influence a less inclusive culture is because of a mindset that they have that they may not even realize, an unconscious bias there. And so really focusing on how do we get each individual to improve or shift their mindsets and behaviors when it comes to diverse talent, and actually acknowledge the fact that they may have some unconscious biases to confront is very important.
Thank you. I'd like to now turn to a longtime chamber friend, and that is Mark Montgomery, who has served on our chamber board and now is serving on our chamber foundation. And Mark has been so helpful to the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and connecting us with some of his clients and also just finding ways to connect. It's been a real honor to work by his side, and he understands the value of the chamber and what we've tried to do and how we can collaborate. And so, Mark, I want to thank you for joining us and all you've done for the chamber, and would really appreciate just some feedback from you to your colleagues and feedback about what the chamber has meant for you and the banks you've represented.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you, Laura. It's been my pleasure to be involved with the Hispanic Chamber for, gosh, it's got to be 7 or 8 years now. At my predecessor bank, the support was there for years before I joined. But Laura asked that I get involved probably 7 years ago and ended up joining the board. The bank was very involved with the Young Leaders initiative. And I would say when I joined the board, it gave me a better perspective of the community. There were a lot of friends that I made on the board through the years. Alex is one, and it was just great to have their perspectives, particularly when I was leading my predecessor bank, and then in joining Amity, just knowing that we've been involved with the chamber for 15 years, it was just a natural progression to stay plugged in, make sure that we are understanding what we need to understand, and being as helpful as we can to Laura and the team at the chamber. And she has put together a fabulous team. The thing that was the most impressive to me, though, was Laura sitting down and trying to understand exactly what the bank wanted to accomplish in its DEI efforts, and then tailoring something that would help us accomplish exactly what we had in mind. And so for that, Laura, thank you so much for listening and making that happen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. We appreciate your ongoing support and investment in the chamber. And I'd like to now ask our newer board member, Scott Silvas of Fifth Third. Scott, thank you for joining us. Scott, you've seen the chamber grow and change over the years. What I'd like to share with those on the group is just what some of those changes are and why it's important to a bank like Fifth Third. Thanks, Scott.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Murillo, and for the opportunity to be here and speak on such an important topic. I do like to share that I do have unique perspective in that as a young professional embarking on a career in Houston some 20 years ago, the very first organization I went to for professional networking and to get better involved and plugged into the community was the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce way back then. And so just to think about how much the chamber has evolved, the overall increased impact it has on the city of Houston in that time, as the city itself has changed, is I think just pretty unique perspective. And I, as we all do, commend Dr. Murillo and her staff for all the things they do, the resources, the connection, the immediate response when you've got a question or you've got an initiative and who's the best person to call, the most connected, and that can help out. And that's always been the Hispanic Chamber. So, I like to think that I am maybe informally a product of the Hispanic Chamber from my professional career, just having been involved for so long, developing relationships, client relationships, people that I've worked with over the years have been relationships developed through those connections, making referrals to the chamber through some of their supplier diversity initiatives, awarding businesses as a supplier to the bank, Fifth Third Bank. We were in a unique position to look for someone to help us build out our office space, nearly a $2 million project. And the bank's efforts allowed us to identify some people through the supplier diversity enablement program and award that to a Hispanic-owned business, which I think was a great program, great feature, and doing great work for us. So it's been an exciting opportunity in the last 2 years, helping Fifth Third Bank establish itself in Houston and being in a position to help allow the bank to be a platinum sponsor for the Hispanic Chamber and leverage a lot of those resources. As have established a team, we've tapped into the emerging leaders to build out a deeper slate of diverse candidates for which we can choose to hire from. And just, again, continue to leverage all the resources. And as this focus with DEI has gone to even higher levels, it's just great to know we're plugged into a great organization that's focusing the same thing and continuing its efforts. So it's been very helpful to us.
Thank you, Scott. Happy to have our next panelist talk to us a little bit about best practices. Cadence is known for not just talking the talk, but walking it as well. And they have engaged an all-star in this space, and that's Myra Caldwell. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for taking the lead, representing those who are the chief executive officers in this space of DEI, Myra.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo, and thank you for having me here today. I think a lot of the best practices that we are focused on in the DEI space at Cadence and other banks and companies I've talked to have been mentioned today. The one I want to focus on really is supplier diversity and community involvement as it relates to organizations such as the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. You know, that is so important that we're listening to the community and understanding what the community needs, not only in terms of financial impact, but in terms of making sure that we are embedding their needs, wants, and desires into our product and service design, service design at the onset. What would they need to support that growth? So definitely supplier diversity and community involvement are important. And I think Andrea hit on a really good point around best practice on hiring and focusing on representation. You know, including women and minorities in the candidate pool and the interviews is very important. Having panel interviews for hiring leadership roles is important, and we're doing that today at Cadence. You know, building a partnership with historically Black colleges and universities to identify talent early. But I think the important point that Andre pointed out was promotions within. So you have minorities in your company today. How are we developing them for programs that will take them to the next level of leadership? And then lastly, I would talk about just celebrating diversity in your company. It's definitely a best practice. What are the cultural issues that are important to the employees in your company who don't look like you? How do we celebrate that? How do we make them comfortable at the table? And just always using an inclusion lens for who is at the table. Are we listening to diverse voices? So include employees in those ideas. And then lastly, what is so important in this space, and I think most CDOs would agree with me, is having great leadership around your program. You know, don't just talk the talk, you want to walk the walk. Make sure that your leader is compassionate about this. And, you know, I have the best possible leader. He was here on the call today that understands diversity. He supports the activities we have going on in the office. And that is so important for change. So making sure that we're aware of the issues that impact minorities, we're doing our self-education, we're aware of our biases, and really just walking the walk. I think that would be my just high-level overview of some best practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Myra. I'd like to ask our chairman now to provide us with some closing comments.
So to wrap up on the chamber, again, we invite all of you to consider building a relationship with the chamber. There's great visibility. I can just tell you, you will get your investment in time and resources. The return can be manyfold what you might invest, and it's great content. It's thoughtful leadership. It's a growing, thriving community, and I hope we can all benefit by sharing in those relationships and finding some ways to work together. So, Laura, turn it back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and to our panelists for joining us today. So on behalf of our board of directors and staff, we'd like to thank you for joining us today on this conversation regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Have a great day. Thank you.